George Soros, Robert Johnson. And before that name even clicked, I went, well, this is all just Davos propaganda. They're all in unison. The CEOs pre-line up their presentations. It's always give us hundreds of trillions of dollars, back up our derivatives, thousands of trillions. I'm not joking. It's 2 quadrillion worldwide. That's 2,000 trillion and growing. Just 5 years ago, it was 1.6 quadrillion. And it's the same message, because then that money goes through the UN, through the IMF, through the World Bank, through all these other globalist subsidiaries, and is given in contracts to them to develop the countries they want. And that's why they like to move everything to India or Mexico or China, because those are corrupt countries that'll 100% do whatever they say. And then none of the money gets to the people. So these are the most cutthroat, nasty, merciless, anti-human BS artists the world have ever seen. But they sit up there in that nice CEO talk in an NPR voice going, oh, the elite are very scared right now of Ferguson and other things. And all over the world, there's an inequity as their globalist system takes over. Warren Buffett. I got hundreds of billions I control, and I'm worth 50 billion. I gave 50 billion or more over the years to charity and a tax-exempt foundation that runs companies that are exempt, and then he gets the money back. I mean, do you understand that, folks? He gets up, on ABC this week, and we just need to raise taxes on rich people because I don't hardly pay any. And then the rich people are $125,000 a year, according to him. And then it turns out he's exempt. And what he wants is the middle class's money. He was the biggest receiver of the banker bailout. That's McClatchy newspaper, not Alex Jones, or McClatchy News Service. Warren Buffett, biggest recipient of bailout. And, of course, he's lobbying for higher taxes and going, poor people deserve something free, just like they deserve free Obamacare. And they deserve to be safe. He gives money to anti-gun groups, but nobody attacks him. Just like Bill Gates is one of the biggest funders of anti-gun garbage. It's like, oh, well, he's Bill Gates. He's nonpartisan. He's the most flaming eugenics, hardcore commie you could imagine. Like, what do you mean he's a billionaire? One of the richest men in the world. Well, that's who always funds communism, because they set offshore, take your money, they're exempt, and you work in a FEMA camp. I mean, you hadn't figured that out yet? These are super alpha males that are ready to crush you and your family if they can. They're working as hard as they can to dumb you down and take your kids away socially and culturally and break women off from men, and they're doing a great, devastating job, and he's working around the clock, both Bill Gates and Warren Buffett, to make inoculation the law. Like it is in India. When those women get those shots, a lot of times they roll out and die. Other times they just are paralyzed for life, or they have all sorts of horrible neurological disorders. And boy, that's a hot shot they got for you. Over here, the soft kill's not quite as noticeable, but they're turning the heat up, studying, seeing if we squirm, seeing how to handle it, getting everybody used to the neurological disorders and cancer off the chart, and people getting their shots and going paralyzed the next day, and just processing it all, seeing if the doctors and nurses notice. The media doesn't really cover it, so everything's just quietly, the ambient temperature is being turned up by these loving people. Meanwhile, the very same Soros chief, his field marshal, former hedge fund director Robert Johnson, that's why they all started getting out of it a few years ago, so they could then criticize it all while they're not really out of it, revealed that worried hedge fund managers were already planning their escapes. I know hedge fund managers all over the world who are buying airstrips and farms in places like New Zealand because they think they need a getaway. How many times you heard this from me? Remember about 6 years ago, I told you that I ran into a billionaire who's very well known. I'll just leave it at that. And they said, are you ready to be one of the top media people in the world? And I said, well, why is that? And they said, because what you're saying is absolutely true. And it's all going to happen and worse than you know. And they said in 5 or 6 years, the United States as we know it will not exist. Remember that statement? Well, we're now 5, 6 years later. And I'm not saying it's all about to happen right now, but but see, now they're suddenly announcing it. It's not Alex Jones telling you he ran into a billionaire in an office complex at a law office a few years ago. It's in the London Guardian. It's in the Financial Times. It's in the New York Times. It's in the Wall Street Journal. It's in a bunch of other newspapers this week that the elite are running to the hills. And they're saying, oh, and what's coming is going to be terrible. Jeepers, creepers, we didn't know it was coming. You better fund world government with $100 trillion to redistribute wealth so they can pose as the savior, as the good billionaires. Warren Buffett, Bill Gates, George Soros, the good demons. Isn't that just cupcake sweet? As inequity soars, the nervous super rich are already planning their escapes. Hedge fund managers are preparing getaways by buying airstrips and farms. And yeah, they're buying islands, building bunkers, hiring permanent mercenaries that live with them, trying to buy off local constabulary. Former hedge fund partner tells Davos during session of inequity. Oh, they're having a whole session on inequity. They, the ones that engineered it all, the ones that wanted to lift the ladder up so there'd be no free market, the ones that wanted to take the world over, bankrupt it, pose as saviors, and come back in with a worldwide Marshall Plan to fix the global depression. Just like George Soros had a Marshall Plan for Greece 4 years ago, and he's got a Marshall Plan last year and this year. If they'll just give him billions of dollars, he'll fix everything, and he'll bring the money in. Did you guys ever find that George Soros wants Marshall Plan for Ukraine? So we do have Ambassador... yeah, you're on air right now, right?
Yes, sir.
Oh, great, great.
Victoria Newland.
Used to, they wouldn't be on air when they were talking. People thought I was talking to myself. That's good. Yeah, do we have that clip?
Yes, sir.
Okay, while you're doing that, just search Soros wants Marshall Plan for Ukraine. I mean, if we can't find that, I don't know what's going on. You guys are doing a great job, but I remember that exact headline, so it should be there. Let's go ahead and play her admitting they got $5 billion to overthrow Ukraine, and then again, Soros said the same thing on CNN. Here it is.
Since Ukraine's independence in 1991, the United States has supported Ukrainians as they build democratic skills and institutions, as they promote civic participation and good governance, all of which are preconditions for Ukraine to achieve its European aspirations. We've invested over $5 billion to assist Ukraine in these and other goals that will ensure a secure and prosperous and democratic Ukraine.
Okay, I've never seen that clip. That's another one. There's another one where she specifically says in the last 4 years, we've spent $5 billion. But there you go. And again, we can pull up the clip of him on CNN admitting that he was instrumental behind Ukraine. Starting it, remember the police being firebombed, buildings being burned down, our media saying they're freedom fighters, just like the Muslim Brotherhood were freedom fighters, taking over in Egypt and blowing up churches and crucifying Christians and murdering everybody. And CIA, Anderson Cooper sits up there with a straight face. This is a great thing. The reason I get into this for 40-something minutes instead of all the other news, and I'm about to get into that, is that if you understand this, you understand everything. There is a global destabilization program, and when they destabilize Ireland or destabilize Greece or destabilize Ukraine or destabilize Mexico, in fact, they shipped hundreds of thousands of guns in, started a drug war down there. We told you 10 years ago a giant drug war was about to begin in Mexico that was meant to break the country down and being run by the West, that Los Zetas was being trained outside the King Ranch in South Texas. A DEA agent told us this and was set up and arrested about a month after. Sell like a still. In fact, that was in the news. Marshall Plan for Mexico. $10 billion proposed to stabilize. And then again, that $10 billion is then pumped through directly to the key players who basically just take the money. They create the crisis, loot the country, then have a bailout, which they then keep. I know I keep just repeating different examples of this. There it is. Mexico, a country in crisis, needs a fix the size of the Marshall Plan. See? Boom. What is that, Daily Beast?
Yes, sir.
So it's the same story over and over again. See, they found that one. It's always the same. Marshall Plan, Marshall Plan, Marshall Plan. That's after they funded Hitler, turned him loose. He didn't work for the West. He was put in power by British intelligence and the U.S. government on record. Time magazine, time of the year twice. My grandfather used to hear him on Dallas radio. They would translate his speeches and say what a hero he was. And then they turned on him once he started invading countries. He'd made a deal, had a secret treaty that's been declassified. That's why they kept Albert Speer and others locked up so long to cover it up. And that's why they never let the deputy Fuhrer, Rudolf Hess, out of the tower. Was because he parachuted in with the treaty and was going to make a big deal out of it. We had a treaty to secretly launch a war, take over all these countries. That's why at Dunkirk, they didn't bomb the British Expeditionary Force when it was stuck on the beach for 5 days, even though Heinrich Himmler, that was Hermann Goering, the head of the Luftwaffe, could have taken them all out. Because they had a deal, folks. It was all a staged event. Just like they had a deal with the French for the French military to stand down and then to give the Vichy fascist control, which they did. The French collaborators just got